I feel like this is the Monty Python part of now for something completely different. Because I'm not here to tell you about an issue or a topic or something that needs investigating, but rather one potential source or way to actually investigate all of those things, and that's using the Marine Mammal Stranding Network. So before I start, how many of you have responded on the beach to a stranded marine mammal? And how many of you have participated in an necropsy as part of a class or session or something every day? So, good. So the first question, make sure we all are speaking common language, know what we're talking about. What is a stranding? And we have a statutory or legal definition for a stranding in the main law that it's a dead marine mammal, basically anywhere in the United States. So on the beach, floating. If it's dead, it's considered stranded. If it's alive and on the beach and unable to return to the water, so basically any cetacean on the beach qualifies there. Or if it's might be able to return to the water but is in need of medical attention, it's considered stranded. Or if it's in the waters of the U.S. and perhaps swimming or perhaps entangled and unable to return to its natural habitat on its own. In other words, if there needs to be human intervention, it's considered stranded. So who is the California Stranding Network? There are 16 primary organizations that make up the Stranding Network. And it's a broad mixture of about every kind of group that you can think of. Governments, universities, nonprofits, for-profits are all represented in the Stranding Network. And also a cross-section of different types of organizations as far as museums, primary rehabilitation centers, aquarium. And basically, I guess what I'm trying to convey with this is that folks' motivation for being a part of the Stranding Network is very different as you go from center to center. So that's one thing to know and be aware of. And as such, too, people's interests, particular interests, and particular capabilities also change throughout the state. And then as part of this session down here, this is a map that you perhaps can't see very well, but shows the Stranding Network organizations that are in the Southern California Bight, ranging from up here just north of Santa Barbara down to our partners in San Diego. So pretty much covering most of the coastline of the state of California. And these are the primary response groups that actually go out and pick up the animals, and then the rehabilitation centers that treat live animals brought in. Why do we care? So I'm here as a representative of the government, the National Marine Fisheries Service. I am one of the coordinators for these 16 organizations. So first I have to tell you care because Congress told us that we have to care. There's a legislative mandate under that Marine Mammal Protection Act that says that we should investigate strandings, that we should be concerned about the health of marine mammals and health trends. And we should be collecting data about them, and then we should be attempting to do our best to correlate that health and health trend data with other environmental parameters, physical, chemical, and biological data. And also that we should be coordinating effective responses to mortality events, specifically unusual mortality events. But of course, beyond just a requirement that we should do this, there's lots of other valid reasons and interesting reasons. So one of which is to try and assess population health and status. One is to look at the ecosystem health, and I have the word sentinels here. You'll hear that a lot, that marine mammals are sentinels of the ocean ecosystem. In some cases, that's because they're the most visible, that you will see dead, stranded marine mammals are much more commonly observed, noticed, reported, written up in newspapers, broadcast throughout listservs, etc., than, say, a similar die-off in horseshoe crabs. So they are sentinels, they are noticed, and can be investigated, lead to investigations of what's actually going on in the entire ecosystem. And kind of on a similar trend, the public or human health impacts as mammals. There's a lot of the things that Judy talked about earlier, zoonotic diseases, and responses to other concerns that could potentially be similar for humans that live near the coast, that share a lot of the same food sources in some cases as marine mammals living just off the coast. So as far as the accomplishments, this is what the statistics look like for the Marine Mammal Stranding Network in California. This is for the entire state of California. And it's very impressive. So this is level A data. Level A is the basic data that again, the law actually requires to be collected for stranded animals. It's kind of the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Not so much on the why, actually. But it does indicate that an animal was responded to, confirmed to be stranded, and identified to the best capabilities of the responders. And as you can see, there's kind of a fairly high number of animals, particularly a spike in 2009 that Danielle talked about was a lot driven by those juvenile sea lions that came in the spring and early summer. But we're getting a couple thousand pinnipeds every year, live and dead. And then cetaceans are in the hundreds, but again, a relatively high number, and primarily stranding dead in California. So value of stranding data, why is it good? Why is it important? Low cost, easy to obtain. So basically, bang for your buck, strandings is probably one of the best ways that you can find out about marine mammals. You don't have to do things like rent boats and spend a lot of days at sea, because after all, they come to you on the beaches. So pretty good, cost effective. You can get basic information without ever holding a knife, without doing more than going out and confirming the animal's there. You can look at presence of absence, where are species found, where are they not found, morphometrics, doing some basic measurements, determining sex, those kinds of things, without even opening up a carcass. Once you do actually move on and do an exam and look inside, you can look for some of the different types of mortality. Is it a natural? Or, as we talked about, there's lots of different factors of that, but, diseases, outbreaks, biotoxins, predation, or other ecological factors like starvation, maternal separation for young animals. Or something that might be human-induced, anthropogenic, like fishery interactions, an intentional catch in a fishery, oil spills, pollutants, noise, or behavioral disturbances. Stranding network data can provide you long-term data that can be useful for health assessments of free-ranging populations. It gives you a comparison data set. And it's also useful to identify anomalies, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So one of the things that I'm here to stress is how important it is to do those thorough exams, to actually open up the animals and look inside. And this is perhaps one of the most visible or high-profile types of things, but tomorrow there's going to be a lot of talk about blunt force trauma vessel strikes. And as Monica mentioned, that you need to actually do the necropsy in most cases to determine it. This is a picture of the same whale. It's a blue whale from the 2007 event. So floating on the left, and this is kind of the area of the strike. And really, from the picture and from the at sea, you don't see very much until you take off the first layer of skin, and you get a 15-foot hematoma that's pretty indicative. You go beyond that, you get lots of hemorrhage, frank blood, and broken bones in very tiny pieces. So generally, with the exception of animals on bows of ships, or in some cases with propeller wounds, we can't definitively say that the animal was killed by a ship unless we've done a necropsy. So some of our future directions and some of the needs for collaborations by the Stranding Network, improving data collection. So expanding to additional species and areas. So I showed you the map that shows that our coastline is pretty well covered, and that's true for live animals and cetaceans. For dead pinnipeds, there's actually very little response in Southern California, looking at dead stranded pinnipeds. So all of that graph with all the numbers, that really is not even representing probably a fraction of how many animals there are. So that's one thing that our office is interested in trying to figure out some ways to partner and perhaps expand our efforts there. Standardized protocols have been developed, are being developed, are being implemented to just standardize the way that we do exams, looking for things like human interaction and doing necropsies and sample collection. Improving expanded exams and how often those happen, doing the full-scale necropsies. Large whales need a lot of people. You don't get one of those necropsies done very quickly with the complement of just a few folks. Increasing sample analyses and interpretation. One of the things, and I think Keith is a good example of this, a lot of our stranding network folks are great at collecting samples and archiving them. And they generally don't have the funds to do anything beyond that. So as far as actually analyzing them or trying to further investigate what might be wrong, there's samples that have been banked, but not a lot of analysis that's gone on. So that's one thing that we would like to try and improve. And then also the interpretation, looking at things on longer time scales or on larger geographic scales. So most of the stranding groups are responsible for a county, which can tell you a lot about what's happening locally, but it would be also great to look at things over a broader scope or time series. Improving our surveillance. Right now, the stranding network is a passive surveillance, which means that we wait for phone calls. So there's basically the only animals that get picked up are those that are reported somehow by somebody. And there's not an active pursuit to go out there and try and find animals. There are a couple of programs in a few places within California, and that's something that could be looked at or tried to maybe expand into some other areas. The next one is exploring companion data sets to identify biases from strandings. Everybody who looks at stranding information, most scientists generally have some problems with stranding data because there are a lot of biases that are inherent in it. We are getting those animals that come ashore. We are getting animals that have something wrong with them already. Generally, there's a reason that they're on shore. So that means that when we look at even basic things like, say, a sex ratio from the animals that we have in the stranding network, we really don't have a great way of knowing if that's representative of the population as a whole. And that kind of continues through basically absolutely everything. So what it would be great to do for us as a stranding network and us as NMFS is to try and partner with folks that are doing some of those wild animal studies to try and see what the ratios are and whether the stranding data does actually reflect what's out there in the wild, or if there's an offset or a correction factor or some kind of thing that would be implemented that would help us interpret our stranding data better and also make our stranding data more relevant to understanding wild populations too. And so one of the goals or future developments of the stranding network is an effective early health warning system. And I just have 2 more slides that kind of explain what that is. So this is an outbreak, and this could be an infectious disease, it could be an oil spill or a pollution event, but these are days, and then the number of cases. And this is assuming that you know everything, and these are all of the animals that are actually impacted. So there's your first case on day 0 or 1. And if you're relying on your passive surveillance or kind of your typical system, it is probably going to be a couple days before you get notified about it and before you get out and actually find your first animal, especially if they're coming in at a pretty low kind of rate. So, but you do go out, you detect the animal, you take the samples, you send them off to the lab, and analytical labs being what they are, you get the results back several days later. And then that gives you a little bit of time to try and figure out what it is that you're going to do. But so you're kind of really breaking into full-on response mode, whatever that might be, out here, and basically you've already missed the peak of the outbreak. And so your opportunity for control or influence, or even if it's just mounting a better response, a more coordinated response, is really pretty limited. You can kind of function on this. Here's the exact same outbreak, the exact same situation. The difference is that now you have baseline data. So going back months previously, you have a pretty good handle on the situation and you know what you should be expecting. And so what that means is that if your baseline is pretty much 0, you can tell almost right away when you get the first call that this is anomalous, this isn't quite what I should be expecting, and you can detect it that much quicker. Now your lab confirmation may still take the exact same number of days, but you'll be able to implement and say, you know what, we need to do something, and we need to do it. We know that we need to do it quicker. And so your opportunity for control has just improved, and depending on the situation, you might actually be able to prevent this many cases, or you might just be able to respond to them better.